substantial escalations in the IDF operations in the Gaza Strip, the military is reporting excavating a new security corridor. Meanwhile, massive fire-bound bombings have been reported in Khan Yunis. The Palestinians are reporting at least 112 people have been killed in the past 24 hours. The humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip continues to deteriorate. The World Food Program has shut down 25 of its bakeries in Gaza due to a lack of flour and fuel. I'm Alon Burstein. Let's dive in. Over the past days, there's been a substantial escalation in the IDF activity throughout the Gaza Strip. 2 weeks after the ceasefire has collapsed, the IDF is now reportedly moving to a new phase of the operation in Gaza. Major attacks have been reported in the last several days, both in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip as well as in the southern parts. In light of the multitudes of reports, I'm going to use this highlight to try to bring us up to speed as to what is happening in the Gaza Strip right now, where is the IDF operating, and possibly where are things going in the future. Starting with the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. In northern parts of the Gaza Strip, the activity of the IDF has been primarily limited to airstrikes. There has been little IDF presence on the ground in the northern parts of the Strip, with the exception of the buffer zone and the Netzarim corridor. That is this area that the IDF maintains, dividing the northern parts of the Gaza Strip from the southern parts. On March 31st, there were major airstrikes were reported in Sajaiya, that is the northeastern parts of the Gaza Strip. And on April 1st, the IDF issued evacuation orders to Palestinians in a lot of different regions throughout the northern parts of the Gaza Strip and Gaza City. This includes the areas of Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia, Sheikh Zayed, El Manshia, as well as Tel El-Zatar, ordering them to evacuate the areas towards the central parts of the Gaza Strip. These evacuation orders were expanded on April 2nd to include other parts of Beit Hanun and Jabalia refugee camp, that is more of the central parts of the Gaza Strip over here. And on April 3rd, immediate evacuations were issued to other areas of Sajaiya as well as to the Tufts region, all in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. Hours later, after that evacuation order was issued, some of the most intensive airstrikes and artillery fire were reported in the region. Palestinian sources stated that, among others, a school housing internally displaced peoples from the Gaza Strip was targeted in the areas of Tufts in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. The IDF reported in response that it did target that school, however, that the compound was being used as a central command center for Hamas. At this point, there are conflicting reports from either side. No one is disputing that school was attacked. However, the Palestinian sources are saying it was only housing internally displaced peoples, whereas the IDF is saying it was housing Hamas officials and used as a command center. Later in the evening on April 3rd, more evacuation orders were issued to Palestinians in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. These include the areas of El Savara, West Zaytun, Tel El Halwa, and the old city of Gaza City, all in the more southern region of Gaza City over here. All of the people there were ordered to move southward towards the Al-Mawasi refugee camp. That means moving more south in the Gaza Strip towards the central parts of the Strip. The IDF also reported that in the different airstrikes in Jabalia refugee camp on April 3rd, 4 Hamas operatives were assassinated. These includes Shadi Diab Abdelhamid Farouji. He was a Hamas operative who participated in the October 7th attack. Muhammad Sharif, he was a main figure in the internal security mechanism of Hamas. Muhammad Hadi Atiyah Daour, he was the head of the rocket division of the northern brigades of Hamas, as well as Muhammad Isa Muhammad Askari. He was an active member of Hamas's internal security mechanism, as well as an operative in the Northern Rocket Brigade of the Hamas units. Turning to the more southern parts of the Gaza Strip, since the return to fighting on March 18th, the more expansive fighting has been in the southern areas of Gaza. On March 29th, the IDF began moving ground units into the different areas of the Rafah city. This is the most southern parts of the Gaza Strip. On that day, IDF units were moved into the El Janina region as well as into the Shabura neighborhood, all in different parts of Rafah, and major airstrikes were also reported in the Bani Suhaila region. In Khan Yunis, this is a more southern city in the Gaza Strip as well. On March 31st, the IDF issued the largest evacuation order since the return to fighting to Palestinians, calling upon all Palestinians in the entire Rafah region, which I will say constitutes 1/5 of the entire Gaza Strip, to evacuate to the Al-Mawasi Humanitarian Zone. That is calling on all Palestinians in this area, reportedly some 3 to 4 to 500,000, to evacuate to the Al-Masi Humanitarian Zone, which is this coastal area over here. By April 2nd, the military launched a massive operation throughout the southern areas of the Gaza Strip. Firebelt bombings were reported in the areas of Rafah and the outskirts of Han Yunis, with Palestinian sources reporting heavy IDF mechanical vehicles also entering into the region. Hours later, the military reported that it had completed its encircling of the Tel Sultan neighborhood, that is this area over here. And I will say also that this is significant because this was the area that some of the most intensive fighting in the first phase of the war was seen in this region. Thus, the fact that the IDF has now started in that region and has completed encircling it is to some extent significant with regards to what are going to be the trajectories in the coming days. In the evening of April 2nd, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu announced that the IDF is currently taking over a new security corridor known as the Morag Corridor, which is going to be held in addition to the Philadelphia Corridor in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip. Now, I will say it was not published exactly where this corridor is going to be. However, based on the IDF operations and calling it the Morag Corridor, which historically was an Israeli settlement in the Gaza Strip, very likely we're looking at a corridor that is going to be somewhat along this region, that is going to sever the Rafah region from the Han Yunis areas. The Morag settlement used to be over here. Based on the IDF operations, very likely, we are seeing the IDF excavate an area. There's going to be a second security corridor, much like the Philadelphia corridor over here, and what the IDF is maintaining in the Tsarim corridor over here. The IDF later confirmed that the military is in fact excavating this new Morag corridor. I will say in a caveat, some sources in Israel expressed surprise that the Prime Minister exposed the plan while it was still being carried out. Right now, the IDF has not taken over that corridor yet. That military operation is still underway. That is the current map of the IDF activity in the Gaza Strip as of now, the evening of April 3rd, in the United States. It's important to note that throughout this expansion of the IDF activity, there has still been no reports of Hamas troops engaging the IDF in combat on the ground. Thus far, all the reports have been of IDF airstrikes and of the IDF expanding its activity, not of Hamas engaging them on the ground in the Gaza Strip. Hamas did fire 3 rockets towards central Israel when the ceasefire broke down. Since then, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad has been the only one that claimed responsibility for rocket fire. Rockets have been fired by the PIJ on April 1st and on April 3rd towards areas of Sderot, Kfar Aza, and Nahal Oz, all those areas surrounding the Gaza Strip. In addition to that, on March 29th, there were reports that detonation occurred near an IDF bulldozer in the Han Yunis area, and mortar fire was later fired on IDF troops in the Han Yunis area. Once again, though, the Al-Quds brigades of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad claimed responsibility for that attack. Other than that, Hamas appears to have taken a tactical decision to not engage the IDF as it advances in the Gaza Strip at this time. I will say I've been asked several times, is this an indication that Hamas has run out of troops or run out of ammunition? In my assessment, that is not the case. Hamas was actively fighting the IDF troops in the Gaza Strip right up until the ceasefire was declared in the middle of January. Thus, it seems very unlikely that they've run out of troops now that they've had 2 months to rebuild. Much more likely, this appears to be a tactical decision at this point. Remains to be seen what Hamas possibly is planning, possibly is not. Obviously, I'll report more as things develop. In addition to the ongoing fighting in the Gaza Strip, another arena I'm going to focus on is the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Humanitarian aid has been cut off from entering the Gaza Strip since the end of Phase 1 of the ceasefire on March 2nd. This is now just over a month. This includes all forms of aid, including food, water, medical supplies, fuel generators. Israel also then escalated and cut off the electrical supply that was going to the Gaza Strip, although I will say that most of the power lines of the Gaza Strip have been severed already. There was only one power line that was operating a water sanitation plant in the areas of Deir al-Balah in the central parts of the Gaza Strip. Several different aid agencies have been warning over the last several days that the aid that entered into the Gaza Strip during the truce, which included over 25,000 aid trucks coming into the Strip, is going to run out in the coming weeks. The United Nations specifically announced in the last several days that the flour supply in Gaza is going to run out within a week. On April 2nd, the World Food Program of the United Nations announced that it is shutting down its 25 bakeries in the Gaza Strip due to the lack of flour and the lack of fuel. Again, there is no electricity coming to the Gaza Strip, so all the operation of electricity is based on generators which require fuel. The World Food Program also said that it will continue to distribute hot meals in the Gaza Strip. However, the food supply will run short within the next 2 weeks. There have also been some reports of shortages in all the different markets throughout the Gaza Strip. At this point, Israel said it is not going to allow humanitarian aid to resume entering into the Gaza Strip until there is any movement on the release of hostages. Remains to be seen what will happen in the coming days. And turning to the hostage front and the ongoing negotiations, I will say that at this point it appears that both sides have reached another stalemate. As a reminder, on Saturday, March 29th, Egypt announced that Hamas has agreed to a new proposal. It's important to note this was not an Israeli proposal. This was a proposal by Qatar and Egypt when it comes to trying to bring the sides back to the table. According to reports, that proposal was for a 50-day truce and the release of 5 Israeli hostages, alongside increases of humanitarian aid, negotiations over Phase 2 and an end to the war, and the release of Palestinian prisoners. Al Jazeera reported on April 2nd that the proposal was the release of 2,500 Palestinian prisoners, i.e. 500 prisoners for each Israeli hostage. These were to include 150 Palestinian prisoners who are sentenced to life in Israeli jails, as well as the release of 2,000 Palestinians who were arrested in the Gaza Strip since the war began. Israel, in turn, reportedly gave a counter-offer to the Egyptian proposal in the last several days. This proposal was for a shorter truce, a 40-day truce, and included the increased amount of hostages that will be released from 5 to 10 live hostages, in addition asking that Idan Alexander, who is a hostage with U.S. citizenship, be released by Hamas regardless of any negotiations as a gesture to U.S. President Trump. Israel's proposal did not list how many Palestinian prisoners would be released in exchange for each hostage, but also included the return of 16 bodies of hostages that are held in the Gaza Strip. In addition, it was reported on March 31st that Israel informed the negotiating countries that regardless of the final deal, the IDF intends to remain along the perimeter positions it is holding in the Gaza Strip, meaning no matter what deal is finally reached, the Israeli military intends to remain in this perimeter that it has excavated in the Gaza Strip, going between half a mile to a mile into the Gaza Strip, along the border between Gaza and Israel, in order to make sure that you cannot have another attack style October 7th. Reports indicate that the IDF has been expanding this perimeter since the ceasefire broke down, i.e. that the IDF is working to excavate more areas in that area to expand that perimeter. On April 2nd, Hamas announced that it has decided to not respond to Israel's proposal for a different type of ceasefire, that Hamas is adhering to what it agreed to with Egypt, leaving us currently in a stalemate as the fighting intensifies. Both sides are saying they are waiting for the other side to come back to them and agree to their deal. Right now we're at a stalemate as the fighting is continuing to intensify, primarily in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, with the airstrikes in the northern areas as well. That is my highlight on the recent escalations in the Israel-Hamas War, and specifically the fighting in the Gaza Strip. If you find these reports informative, please do remember to hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to know when reports come out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to list them in the comment section below. I'm Alon Burstein. I'm a visiting assistant professor and Israel Institute fellow in the Department of Political Science at Tufts University. Thanks for watching.